Well, it looks like spring's finally gotten here. We've got some nice weather out here. We've got a lot of birds singing in the background. And we're going to talk about ecosystems, and more specifically about niches. A niche is a role that an animal plays in the ecosystem that it lives in. And it can be pretty specialized. Think about like doctors. There's a medical community, but among the doctors within that community, there's a lot of specialization. You've got cardiologists, you've got podiatrists who work on feet, you've got neurologists who work on nerves. So you get the idea. Well, animals do the same thing. They kind of adapt over time, either physically or behaviorally, so that they can fill a niche in their ecosystem. So we're going to look at a bird community for an example, since we've got a lot of birds out here singing in the background. They were really singing here a minute ago. But we're going to look at the Everglades in specific, and we're going to look at a little tidal pond in the Everglades, and we're going to look at the roles different birds play in there. I've just got a few pictures here for you. So if you look at this heron here, the great blue heron, he's got long legs that allow him to wade into the water, and a long neck and beak that allow him to stick his head down in there and catch fish. And that's how he makes sure that he doesn't have to compete with all the other birds. Over here you got a little night-crowned heron, and he's got long legs, but he doesn't have a very long neck or beak. He kind of sits on low-hanging branches over the water and just grabs fish when they come by. And then we've got a purple gallinule up here. Look, he's got a small body, but he's got great big feet that allow him to walk on lily pads. And what that does is it distributes his weight so that he can walk on the lily pads without them sinking. And he can get out on the edge or in the midst of these lily pads, and he can catch food there where no other bird goes. Lastly, we've got this anhinga, and he's kind of got a reflection in the water that you can see, but his head's sticking up out of the water right here. He swims almost entirely underwater, and he'll go out into the deeper open water where the wading birds aren't, or where the gallinule doesn't go, and where there's no overhanging branches, and he'll just swim along, and then he'll stick his whole head underwater, and he'll catch fish and eat them that way. Now there's a lot of other birds that you might find in the same pool, and it's really kind of fascinating when you think about it, because what happens is you'll see the gallinule out there on the lily pads doing his thing, the herons inshore wading around doing their thing, and then you'll look and you'll see birds that are flying around the pond in the air, and they're catching bugs. And then you'll see some birds that are just swimming on the surface of the water out there, and they're skimming water off the surface, and they're catching their food that way. And then you got birds that'll dive down in the water. You'll got birds that'll swoop down and grab fish. All these birds are in the same ecosystem. They're all out there looking for food, but they've all developed their own special way that they can get food, so they don't have to compete with all the other birds that are in the pond. They only have to compete with members of their own species. So that's what we talk about when we talk about specialization or fitting into a niche. So what you can do is you can sit down with a friend, you can take out a piece of paper and make like a little graphic organizer, and you could write for a heading, birds in a pond. And then you can start thinking about skimmers, waders, divers, and you can divide them into categories and start trying to think about examples of each one. Ducks are a really good example. Some ducks just kind of swim around and skim the surface. Others will dive and put their heads underwater, and the only thing sticking up will be their tail. So they've all got kind of a neat way that they've got to get food. Some birds just stay on shore, and they just find what they can get on shore. They don't go very far out. So they've all got kind of neat ways that they get food, and that's their niche in the ecosystem. So what I want you guys to do is I want you to sit down and think about the different ways that animals specialize, then pick an ecosystem. It doesn't have to be in your backyard. It doesn't have to be the Everglades. It can be anywhere in the world you want, or it can be right in your backyard. Pick an animal. It doesn't have to be an animal. It can be a bird. It can be an insect. It could be fish in a pond. Anything you want. And then I want you to put that animal in an ecosystem, and I want you to talk about that animal's niche. That's how we're going to extend the lesson. So I just want you to go ahead and extend the lesson. Have some fun.